Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to the attic. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is a return caller named Mac. Let's listen to what Mac has to say.
Hi, Lloyd. This is Mac. I left a voicemail a few months ago that you've already played on your channel. I'm leaving another voicemail. I wanted to talk about a different subject today. You had a voicemail video you posted recently of a woman that basically knew it wasn't the truth, but still wanted to identify as a Jehovah's Witness and was perfectly content in doing so. And this is something that's been bothering me for a while. PIMOs. Physically in, mentally out, for those watching this that don't know. Um, when I woke up, I guess I was a PIMO for maybe 6 months before I disassociated. Um, I considered fading, but with my family circumstances, that was going to be impossible. But the main reason that I officially disassociated was that I wanted to have nothing to do with what witnesses were known for. Obviously I didn't believe it was the truth anymore, but that wasn't really the motivating factor for me to officially leave. It was the CSA, realizing that the whole blood teaching was crap and just caused thousands of people to die for no reason. The organ transplant thing, that you weren't allowed to have an organ transplant within, you were allowed to have it, then you weren't allowed to have it, then you were allowed to have it. No apologies or anything, but how many people died during those 10 years that you couldn't have it? Who knows? But I guess apparently it sucks to be them. The organization doesn't care. The things that happened to the brother, or I say brothers, the witnesses in Malawi, stuff like that, I wanted nothing to do with. I don't want my name on any of their records. I don't want to be associated with them at all. So my question, I guess it's not really a question. I can't comprehend how people stay in the organization once they realize that it's not true and they find out what the organization has done. Now, I do understand certain circumstances, 18-year-olds that they don't have any money, they can't afford to move out or whatever, so they pretend. That makes sense, okay? Um, or people who have a really old parent, they're in their 80s and they're just waiting for them to pass away because it would, break their heart or whatever if they left. And so that makes sense. But there are certain circumstances that don't make sense to me. For example, I watch your channel a lot. I watch other XJWs. I check out the Reddit once in a while. And I see people talk about elders and ministerial servants that are PIMO, that are PIMO and have been in the organization since they woke up, years. And that just boggles my mind. I can't comprehend how someone could realize it's not the truth and still be an elder. And in some cases, become an elder or a ministerial servant after the fact, after they woke up. When I woke up, I realized right away I could not go door to door anymore preaching to people something that I don't believe. So I don't understand how people can go up on the platform and give a talk basically helping the organization indoctrinate people when they know that it's wrong. I don't understand that. And I hate to use a witness argument, but if you ever look up the YMCA on the online library, the witnesses argue that you can't join the YMCA because of its Christian background, it's a different Christian religion, whatever. And that membership in an organization, basically, you're saying that you agree with what that organization stands for and practices. And while I think with the YMCA, that's a bit extreme, if you're going there to, lift weights or whatever, if you use that argument with the witnesses, like I think that applies more so to Jehovah's Witnesses. How could you be a part of this organization knowing what they've done and what they continue to do? And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this. Everyone's going to be pissed off. But I just wanted to get your input and see what you thought of that. But that's it. That's all I have. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for leaving your message, especially since towards the end there you acknowledged that this is going to be a controversial message or a controversial take on your part. I think it's important, frankly, that we have these conversations. So, whether or not we agree with each other, it's still important to kind of get it all out on the table and talk about it. And then people can make their own minds up, can't they, about where they stand on a given issue. I think, let me just start off with the YMCA analogy, and then that might kind of move us further along. I think your YMCA analogy is flawed because, when it comes to the YMCA, to my knowledge at least, you're not punished for leaving. It's not like if you start saying negative things about the YMCA or you break one of the YMCA's rules, the YMCA will arrange for you to be shunned by your family. So I think it's a flawed analogy, and that analogy alone would indicate to me that you're perhaps a little bit detached or haven't quite given sufficient thought to the full repercussions or ramifications of Jehovah's Witness shunning. In your own case, you were able to extricate yourself fairly quickly. I say fairly quickly, it still was a process. But you were able to extricate yourself fairly quickly and just wash your hands of it all for conscientious reasons that I and many others would wholeheartedly agree with. You loathe the cover-up of child sexual abuse, the double standard in Malawi, the heinous blood teaching, etc. And you don't want your name to be attached with an organization with that track record in any way, shape, or form, so you've left. However, you did say in your own story, this is not me kind of putting words in your mouth, you did say it took you 6 months. So it's not like you discovered the child sexual abuse thing or the Mexico-Malawi double standard or the blood teaching thing, and you were immediately like, got to write my letter of disassociation. I don't think that's how it played out. If it took you 6 months, you had to arrange your affairs so that your life could be recalibrated in such a way that you could comfortably move on without it having a hugely detrimental impact on you personally. And therein lies the issue that I think you're largely overlooking, which is that people's lives can be incredibly complicated and incredibly entangled in the Jehovah's Witness cult, to the point where sometimes it takes more than 6 months. Sometimes it takes double that, or triple that, or quadruple that. Sometimes, for whatever reason, just for the sake of their mental health, people need to stay at least a Jehovah's Witness in name only for years, just kind of saying what they're expected to say or living some pretense. Unthinkable though that may be for you or perhaps me, that's what gets them through life, so that they are able to just kind of inch closer to perhaps a final point where they can break their ties completely. It does get a little bit weird, I agree, when it comes to elders and ministerial servants staying in the organization for years, even though they're awake. But to be completely honest, first of all, I'm not sure that it's quite as simple as saying, well, when an elder gets up on a platform, he's helping to indoctrinate people. I think that different elders are better than others when it comes to indoctrinating people. And I think it's possible to give a talk on a platform that's sort of neither here nor there in terms of, extolling the virtues of Jehovah's Witness beliefs. In other words, you can get on the platform and give a fairly neutral talk that's just generically about the Bible and kind of get away with it without it being very controlling or manipulative. And I can imagine if I were a PIMO elder, that's the sort of talk I would be giving, bearing in mind that for a lot of elders, there's this expectation placed on them by their family that they not just be Jehovah's Witnesses, but that they be elders. And if they're not elders and they're not punching their weight in the congregation, it's a source of shame for the family. It's like, how dare you put me in a situation where I'm, for example, married to an ex-elder? That would be so shameful for me. So that's the sort of dynamic we're dealing with here. And I also think that PIMO elders, and to a degree PIMO ministerial servants, we've even had PIMO Bethelites. We've even had on this, as evidenced on this channel, PIMO Hospital Liaison Committee members. First of all, this whole thing of there being people in positions of authority who are PIMO, that's exactly what you can expect in a captive organization that's punishing people for thinking for themselves. It says everything about how controlling this organization is, that there are people in positions of authority even who don't believe because they're terrified of the punishment if their true feelings were known. But second of all, by being in those positions, such as being in Bethel or being on a hospital liaison committee, they are able to assist activists like myself and send video materials that ordinary Jehovah's Witnesses and certainly members of the public do not have access to, that help us learn so much more about the organization. So in the case of my HLC contact, I'm able to make multiple videos. Currently it's the Blood Tapes live stream. I'm able to make multiple videos showing the manipulation that goes on within HLCs. I wouldn't be able to do that if my contact, upon learning that it's a manipulative, abusive group, just immediately wrote a letter. And that's not to say that, people shouldn't do that, but there is utility, if you think about it. There's utility in people sticking it out a little bit if they can and if they want to, if only so that they can get information sort of leaked out, whether it's in the form of videos. I've even had Bethelites send me copies of the Shepherd book. So I have a couple of actual Shepherd book copies thanks to Bethel contacts who are PIMO. So I understand, your reasoning to a degree, but I also think that to a degree you're kind of overlooking how controlling the organization is and how we're all different. We all have different family circumstances. Our mental health is a very, very delicate thing that we need to manage and we need to be mindful of. And my own attitude is that everyone needs to make these decisions at their own pace and implement their exit or their escape from the organization at their own pace in such a way that they don't look back and think, oh, I regret that. If I'd only been a little bit more strategic, then, and if I'd only been a little bit more patient and just, made sure everything was properly aligned before leaving, my life would be so much better now. To the same extent, I can imagine people thinking, you know what, I wish I would have sent a disassociation letter early on, and then I would feel better about myself. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a wide variety of situations and nuances and complexities that each individual needs to weigh for themselves. And so that's why, my position has always been that you need to figure it out for yourself. And no one can be made to feel ashamed for dealing with an incredibly complicated situation in the way that they have chosen, in a way that works for them. Because the last thing you would want, well, let's say, for example, that my official position was, as soon as you find out that it's a cult, you should disassociate. You should write that letter and you should hand it to your elders. Well, you can imagine if someone were to follow that advice, oh, well, I'm going to do this because this is what it says on the Lloyd Evans channel. What if the shunning that they immediately came up against was so severe that they ended up committing suicide? I would be partly responsible if I'd effectively coerced them into doing something that they weren't ready to do, or that ended up creating this situation for them. So it has to be, I'm afraid, a case-by-case individual thing where people take their own circumstances into account and do things at their own pace. And yes, on occasion, it will lead to scenarios where perhaps an elder, a servant, a Bethelite, a hospital liaison committee member is having to effectively be a double operative, or whatever you want to call it. Having said all that, I will say that I can imagine there being such a thing as a PIMO who doesn't have good intentions and knows that it's not true, but is staying inside because they enjoy the power and they enjoy having just this importance attached to them in an organization that they know to not be true. And so that they maybe even watch my channel and get a kick out of it, because it's like they just enjoy being able to control people. I can imagine that situation. Never underestimate how twisted people can get. But I don't think that the majority, let's say, of PIMOs or even PIMO elders are like that. I think that, or I like to think that in the vast majority of cases, if someone is a PIMO, a physically and mentally out Jehovah's Witness who knows that it's a cult and feels like they have to walk the walk and talk the talk, it's because they are managing their mental health and they are managing their family circumstances in the best way that works for them. So I hope this answers your question. Thanks again for calling in. Don't forget that if you'd like to leave a message, the thing to do is go to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to broadcast your message on this channel. But that's all I have time for. Thank you so much for watching.